So I will be making a recording available to you as a video as well as the slides. And then we will be holding a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. All right, let's go ahead and dive right in. First thing I want to talk about is the editing process. So editing is the first stage in building your book. I'm assuming that you at least have your first draft written. And just to make sure your first draft is not your final draft, you should not expect to drop the very first draft of your manuscript on your editor. They'll likely just send it back. You should go through and do all of these stages of editing to the best of your ability on your own before sending it off to any sort of professional editor. So these stages that we are going to be talking about, do them on your own first. And then it's time to send it to maybe your peer reviews. So on your own, you want to do kind of your copy editing, line editing, proofreading, and do all those steps on your own. Actually, so self-editing is, you're doing your comprehensive editing, your line editing, proofreading. Peer review is when you get that draft kind of done, you're going to send it off to do beta readers, maybe some friends and family, have them review that book and get back to you any suggested changes or anything like that. Proofreading is that final step. So while you're working on that draft of your book, don't worry so much about the commas and the quotation marks. Do it to the best of your ability, but don't stress too much about maybe a typo or a missing comma. I mean, you may end up rewriting that entire chapter down the roads, so don't waste your time too much on getting it perfect before you move on to that next chapter. Just get it on paper. Don't worry too much about that proofreading stage. Get it written. Then it's going to go through all those stages, and you're going to probably rewrite and revise that work many times over. Once it's gone through all those revisions, then it's time for proofreading. It's the final stage that you're really going to worry about if you're missing a comma or a quotation here and there. So, you don't want to just not worry about it at all. Write to the best of your ability, but don't stress about getting that perfect chapter done before moving on. So you are going to have proofreading, line editing, and of course, you could also do comprehensive editing that's more the developmental stage of editing, where your editor might go through the manuscript and make suggestions for revision. For fiction, they might look at opportunities to improve characterization, story arcs, conflict, and make suggestions for what those changes might be. They are not going to rewrite your document or your manuscript for you. They will make suggestions for revisions, hand it back to you, and it is up to you to make those revisions in your own writing style and using your own voice. Once you've done that, then it would go on to the line editing stage. And that is where you're looking at more sentence structure, stylistic consistency, the number 76 versus writing out 76, make sure it's consistent. And kind of looking at it like it says line by line. While proofreading is more those last minute accidents that may have been missed during line editing. So proofreading is not meant to correct, like say you don't know how to use a semicolon correctly at all, and your entire document you're using semicolons incorrectly. That's not what proofreading is for. That would be picked up in line editing. Proofreading is assuming that you do know how to use a semicolon, and most of the document you're using it correctly, but you may have made an accident and every now and then used it incorrectly or forgot it. It's to catch those last minute mistakes. So don't expect proofreading to go through and make sure every single thing is wrong because you don't know how to use commas, you don't know how to use quotations properly. That's for line editing. So do all this as much as you can on your own, then send it off to an editor, and they will do it all again, but in a professional manner. Keep in mind that if a book is traditionally published, and they have the big traditionally published houses, your book, if you're going that way, is going to go through many, many stages of editing and through different editors. You might have one editor that's doing your comprehensive editing, another one for line editing, another one for proofreading, and it might go through multiple proofreading stages. If you're a self-publisher, chances are you can't afford that. Editing is expensive. So you're probably going to just hire one editor, maybe go through the comprehensive editing and then some line editing and proofreading all in one person. And just keep in mind that mistakes can get overlooked. An editor may miss a few things by the time it's all done, and that can happen. So you do want to keep in mind you're probably going to have some mistakes that are going to be missed, and you're going to want to correct those before sending it off to publication, or they may be found after publication, and you'll want to get those fixed and sent off a new PDF to the printer to do a revision, and so the next books go out, they are correct. So this is the stages of editing. So when you're talking about editing, there are many different stages. It's not just flat out editing. Keep that in mind. If you are working with a professional book editor, you're going to need to send your editor a Microsoft Word document of your manuscript. Don't send them a hard copy of your book. Like, don't print out your manuscript and then send it to them in the mail. They want a Microsoft Word document. If you're using an old version of Word, like 2003 or so, upgrade. Try to get, it doesn't have to be the most current version, but try to get one that's been put out in the last few years or so. There are more features, and the way they do the editing may conflict with your version of Word, and they're most likely using the most current version. They're going to be using Microsoft Word's track changes and the reviewing and comment panes in Microsoft Word and to mark up your document. If you are not familiar with those features in Word, you should study up on them and learn how to use them. So when you get your edited document back from the editor, you're going to understand what you're looking at. I'm going to show you an example of what that may look like in Microsoft Word. We have just a Word opened up with the reviewing pane turned on, and you can see the little markups in the document with some red markings. That's track changes. It's showing the changes that were made to the document. And then over to the right, you can see a comment pane where a little comment was marked up, pointing to where the question was asking. Comments are usually suggestions or questions about something going on in the document. And to the left, under the reviewing pane, it says revisions. It shows you all of the different revisions that have been made on these pages. Now with track changes, the original is still there in the background. If you don't agree with one of the changes that the editor has made, you can reject the change, and it will go back to the way you had it originally. So you're going to want to go through all these changes that the editor has done and either accept them or reject them. What we typically suggest you do is you just go through the document and only do your rejections. So don't worry about accepting one if you like it. Just go through and look through the ones you don't like, reject those. Then when you're done, you can just do an accept all. So you don't have to do the accepts one by one. Just do them all at the end in a batch with an accept all changes. So sometimes they're going to ask you a question or make a suggestion, and then it's up to you to retype or rewrite that section that they're making a comment on. So get used to this. If you have Microsoft Word, I hope you do, because you will need it if you're going through the editing process. Go into that review pane and just start playing around under track changes and reviewing pane and the showing markup and the all markup. I'm sure you can find some videos on YouTube. I know our editor is working on a tutorial on this that we can send to clients we work with, and we'll probably put it up on YouTube as well. Just get familiar with it. Your editor will love you if you know what you're doing. It's frustrating when you do not. So that pretty much sums up editing. Editing is a very long process, and you're going to want to make sure you understand what type of editing you are hiring the editor for. So if you're hiring someone to do editing, make sure you know what level of editing, how many rounds of editing. Typically what you're paying for is one round of editing. Means they're going to go through your document from start to finish one time. And some people like to get multiple rounds to catch those little things that they may have missed the first time around. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about interior design. This is the layout of the book, and it's also to meet the specifications from the printer. So What elements make up interior book design? Of course, like page size is one, fonts that are used, and the font size, stylistic consistency, so all chapter titles look the same, all writing heads look the same, the margins and the gutters, hyphenation, table of contents. There's lots of different things that go up, that make up interior book design. And a lot of people don't think about all the little things that go into this. If you are doing the interior book design on your own, you should get into the habit of looking through books and understanding what you're looking at. There's a lot of common mistakes that are made in book design when someone is designing their own book. We're going to touch base on a few of those. And my reasoning for this is, even if you're hiring someone to do your book design for you, you want to make sure they know what they are doing. So if you hire somebody and you get the book back and you notice a few of these things, which we are going to get into more detail on, if you notice some of these mistakes, you need to make a point of getting this corrected. I want you to be able to recognize what's a good design and what's a bad design, some of the basic things. And this also goes to you if you're doing the book design on yourself, on your own. These are things you want to avoid. So first, we're going to talk, here's a few of them, the fonts, paragraph spacing, hyphenation, blank pages, and such, and we are going to get into these in more detail. First, let's take a look at the fonts. Really simply, there's two different types of fonts that people use in book design for the most part. Serif font and sans serif font. Serif font, you're looking for that little stroke at the end of, the little line at the end of each stroke, so you can see, let me see if I can do a little pointer. You can see that little stroke here at the end of the R's. That is what basically is called a serif. Those are what they're referring to. Sans serif does not have that. It's nice and smooth and clean or round. They don't have any of those little strokes there. So that is a sans serif, or without serif is what that kind of means. Okay, one second. Okay, so examples of serif fonts: Times New Roman, Georgia, Book Antigua, Garamond. These are all default fonts that can be found in Microsoft Word if you're looking for examples. Sans serif, some examples would be Arial, Tahoma Helvetica. Those are sans serif fonts. So these are the two types of fonts we're talking about. But when do you use them is another, which we'll get into. First off, there's some fonts you should avoid. There are some default fonts that come with Microsoft Word that you should not use in your book design. Doing so kind of just tells people that, hey, I didn't put much thought into my font. I just used defaults that I found in Word. Here you go. Times New Roman. You see this a lot in books that are done by self-publishing authors, and it should not be used. Times New Roman was developed in the 1930s specifically for printing in newspapers, and it's not meant for book design. There is different specifications for how text is created, the fonts are created for printing on newspaper print versus in a book. The amount of spacing and everything, it's not right. It was never meant to be used for books. But it was a default to Microsoft Word for a long time, and a lot of people default to that when they're choosing a font for their book. Avoid it. Arial is a sans serif font that you should avoid. Again, it's just the default font in Microsoft Word. Everybody sees it every day. If you take your book to those in the book profession and they see that you're using Times New Roman or you're using Arial, they might just walk away from you. So take some time to choose some fonts. Comic Sans, please never, ever, ever use Comic Sans unless you're printing out some kids' invitations on your home desktop printer. Don't ever use it in a book design. And Verdana, not quite as bad as the other ones, but it is another Microsoft Word default font that you should avoid. Commercial fonts. You can find some commercial fonts online at places they called font foundries that you can purchase some. Adobe sells a good collection of fonts. Adobe Garamond Pro was specifically made for printing in books. It's a really good font to choose. Warnock Pro is another one that was made for books. Futura is a nice one, and Caslon Pro is another. These are all professional commercial fonts that you can purchase. If you happen to have Adobe Photoshop or Adobe InDesign, you probably already have these fonts because they come with those programs. And also want to keep in mind that the italic version of, say, Adobe Garamond Pro is different than just using the italics in Microsoft Word. There's actually two different fonts, and that goes for any commercial good font. You want to make sure if you're purchasing fonts that you purchase the default font, which is normal. You also purchase the bold one and the italic one. They may have also bold italic, and there are different character sets for how you're using the font. So it can get a little expensive. You might pay one for the normal font, but getting all those different variations might get a little expensive. It's one reason people will hire a professional book designer. They should already have all of these fonts. The large collection of fonts that Adobe sells, if you say you want to buy the whole collection and get them on a CD, is going to run you a few $1,000s. We have a collection here, so you can see that investing in some good fonts can get expensive. If you're looking for a Microsoft Word font that is safe to use, look for Garamond. Not Garamond Pro that Adobe has, but just plain Garamond. Book Antica is also acceptable, and that's for your main body of text. Now, you also need to think about where you use these fonts. And for example, sans serif fonts should always be used in the main body of text serif fonts should be used in the main body of text, but sans serif fonts could be used for, like, say, a chapter title or a running head. You can also use a serif type font. So I think we get into that a little bit later, but let's first look at paragraphs. We're going to look at first line indent and paragraph spacing. What I'm talking about here is this is the first line indent here. In most books, the first line of your paragraphs is going to be indented a little bit. But you notice on this one, which is correct, there is no space between the paragraphs. It is incorrect to have a big gap between these spaces, between the paragraphs. That is incorrect. So never both indent the text and have a gap between there. That is incorrect. Okay, and next we're going to talk about hyphenation. Now, you can see it's a little difficult at first to notice this, but this is correct on the left with hyphenation. I made a lot of hyphenation in here just so you, as an example. You can see I used it many times, probably more than you would in a normal book design. I wanted to highlight it a little bit. But you notice that it makes the spacing between the words consistent. There's the same amount of spacing between all of these words. That is what you're looking for. If you do not use hyphenation, then you see that you get a lot of big breaks here, lots of different types of spacing between the words. It's not consistent. So you do want to turn on hyphenation, and if you're using Microsoft Word or InDesign, you want to hyphenate that document. It is standard in book design. So there are a few rules. You should not hyphenate a word across pages. So say you get at the end of the page and you have a word there, it shouldn't be hyphenated and then continue at the top of the next page. That is incorrect. You should also not hyphenate short words. So if the word is only three or four characters long, it should not be hyphenated. And you also should avoid hyphenating the last word in a paragraph. So like this happiness here should not ever be hyphenated. It's the last word of the paragraph. Microsoft Word does not have many controls for that, where InDesign does. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. One thing you should never do is if you're setting up your document in Microsoft Word and you're not really, liking the way things work, and you want to create a hyphen someplace, so you might just put a little dash here from your keyboard and just put a dash and force a hyphenation. What happens is then if you change any of your fonts or edit your document at all, or say you send it off to somebody for formatting, that dash will always be there in your document whether or not it falls at the end of the page or not. So you should never manually add hyphens to your document to get it to look like this. You can turn hyphenation on and off as an option in both Microsoft Word and InDesign. So let the program add the hyphens for you. Don't manually add hyphens to your document by using kind of a cheater method. That will just end in a nightmare. Okay. So next, we're talking about justification. And this is another reason why you should hyphenate, because if you try to do justification without hyphenating, you can see it gets wrong. So here you can see this, what's wrong here is this right edge is all jagged. It's called a jagged right. And if you open up any traditionally published book, you'll see that's not how it looks. It's a nice box type effect where you're getting this line here, and that is right justified. So that is what you're looking for. So your text in your document should be justified, not a ragged right. So that is simple to do in Microsoft Word or in InDesign. They're just settings that you can choose for your text. Okay, this is something that irks me all the time when I see this happen in self-published book or any book, is blank pages should always be blank. If you're having, say, all your chapters start on a right-hand page, you will occasionally get a blank left-hand page preceding that chapter. It should not have anything on it. It should not have a running head. It should not have page numbers. It needs to be completely blank. Now, even though page numbers are not printed on the page number is still counted. So if you have, say, page 53 has text on it, then the blank page 54, and the next page would be printed page 55. You don't, you do count the page number, you just don't print the page number on that. So blank means blank, so you don't put that stuff on any page. You should learn how to use section break in Microsoft Word in order to do that correctly. Running heads. Running heads are like usually at the top of the book in the chapters, you will see like the author name on one side and maybe the book title or chapter title on the other. That's great. That's how it should be, except on chapter title pages. On the first page of every chapter, you should not have that running head. So this here is wrong. It needs to be blank. It shouldn't be on those. Again, you will want to learn how to use section breaks properly when you're using Microsoft Word in order to control what shows up in your header and also in your footers on each page in your sections. Okay, let's talk about page numbers here. Chapter 1 is usually page 1. So if you're like you have some stuff preceding chapter 1, such as a table of contents or acknowledgments, those are usually numbered with lowercase Roman numerals if you're numbering them, but chapter 1 starts over as page 1 like this. So you can put them at the bottom of the pages or in the running heads, but if they put them in the running at the top of the pages, again, just like the running heads, they should not appear at the top of the first page of every chapter. You can control the numbering using both section breaks and the page numbering. You can tell it to start like this section as page 1, as long as you have section breaks in your document. And left pages are always even numbered, and right-hand pages are always odd numbered pages in a book. And make sure you don't skip page numbers in your book. Blank pages are blank, but they're counted, but you don't want to skip pages. Your printer will actually reject them if they see that there are missing page numbers or you're skipping numbers. Curly quotes versus straight quotes. Now, a curly quote, as you can see here where it says correct or right, this is a curly quote. It curls in on the opening and the closing of the quote. That is correct. Now, depending on what font you're using, they may look slightly different, but you can always see some type of a little curl going in there. Where a straight quote, they're just straight up and down. The straight quote should only be used for mathematical type things in a document. Maybe you're using it as abbreviation for feet or inches. But that is all. For all dialogue and everything else, you really need to be using those curly quotes. So check through your document and see if you notice that you're using straight quotes anywhere. And that is easily fixed in Microsoft Word. So for instance, if you go into Word, you can do autocorrect, and you can basically go to File, go to Options, and then Proofing. Click on autocorrect options and make sure that the replace straight quotes with smart quotes is checked, and close it out, and then it'll actually, every time you're typing a quote, it will use a smart quote. But if you do see straight quotes in your document, after you check this setting, you can just go into your Find Replace and replace a double quote with a double quote, replace it with itself, and it will replace it with the curly quote. Same with a single quotation mark. It will replace it with the curly quote equivalent. So double check that. You don't want any book going to print using those straight quotes. Okay, I'm going to show you really quick here. I'm going to open up a PDF. I'm going to show you one quick example of what would be a bad book design that's pretty much utilizing everything I pointed out that's wrong in book design. So it's going to look really bad because I've done everything wrong. Then I'm going to show you a quick example of a very simple book design that's doing things more correctly. And both of these are done in Microsoft Word. I did not use InDesign for these samples. So let's look at this, what not to do. And really the goal here is I'm just going to go through and point out a few things about what has been done incorrectly, and just so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. Really quickly here, we see a page number 1 on the title page. You know, chapter 1 should be page 1, and also title pages should not be numbered. This is using Arial font, which is just a standard default Microsoft Word font. Again, we've got page numbers up here, we've got headers up here, we've got straight quotes going on up in here. None of that is good. And again, table of contents should not have those running heads or page numbers. Blank pages should not have any of that up there. And then on the chapter title page, again, should not have those running heads or page numbers. We've got a ragged right, looks really bad. We've got that spacing here between, oops, excuse me, pitch the wrong button. Go back in there. And you can see that extra spacing between the paragraphs there, not good. Let's see here, what else do we have I wanted to point out? As you can see, it just doesn't look good. I believe I pointed out, yep, here is one thing I didn't talk about it, but I wanted to bring up. You can see at the bottom of this paragraph here, and it's one paragraph, if you go over here, we've just got a few words of that paragraph left. That is what's called, we got widows and orphans is what those are referred to as. So if you have a single line of text from the top of a paragraph or a single line of text at the end of the paragraph appearing by itself at the end or beginning of a page, that is not good. You should turn on widows and orphan control in Microsoft Word, and it will correct that automatically for you. Again, blank pages. Here, down here is another widow and orphan that you want to avoid. Let's see, I think that pretty much sums it up, all the bad stuff that's done on that. As you can see, no good. Okay, let's really quickly look at that same book that's done a little bit better. Again, that's just done in Microsoft Word. So I'm just going to quickly scroll through here. You can see we're using the curly quotes. You know, everything looks nice and clean, little ornamentation there, using the proper fonts. Have the page numbers up there. It looks just so much better following just the rules we talked about. And of course, I showed you everything wrong in that design. But it makes a huge impact on how someone may look at your book if you do things wrong versus do them right. So, okay, that's enough of me showing you what's good and wrong. Let's go ahead and get back to the main PowerPoint slides here. I want to briefly talk about the differences between Microsoft Word and Adobe InDesign before we move on to cover design. Microsoft Word is used by many self-publishers who are designing the book on their own. Word was never really meant to be a page layout program like that, though. It is just a word processor. However, it could be used to do some basic book layouts as long as you know the rules and use them and you know, account for those like we just talked about. It's very inexpensive. You probably already have it. It's easy to learn. It does have some problems with the spacing between characters. I showed you a bit on that hyphenation. But even with the hyphenation, Word sometimes does have issues with the spacing between words not being consistent. It also has some problems with hyphenation. You can't control those rules I talked about as far as breaking across pages or not hyphenating the short words or not hyphenating the last word in a paragraph. You're going to have to look for and correct for those problems manually. It won't handle them automatically. Whereas Adobe InDesign is a page layout program. It is what the professionals use to lay out book designs. However, it's very expensive and it has a steep learning curve. It's not easy to learn. It does handle spacing and hyphenation very well, and it is a very good choice for complex books. If you're doing a fancy, say a photo book, coffee table book, or a textbook, or a nonfiction book that's got a lot of tables and charts and graphs and images that the text is wrapping around it, Word is not going to be a good choice for that. You're going to want to look at using InDesign. So if you're hiring a professional book layout designer, ask them what program they're using. If they're using Microsoft Word, they're not using the professional software that you're paying them to use. So see if they're using InDesign instead of Microsoft Word. You may find some people that are doing really inexpensive book layout that are using Microsoft Word. Just be aware of what you're getting. If they're doing Microsoft Word and they're charging a lot of money, there's something wrong with that. So see what they're using, and if you want to learn InDesign, of course you can. Just keep in mind that it is hard to learn if you're not already familiar with it. I took a long time ago, I took a 4-day boot camp just to learn the basics of InDesign. Took me 4 days. It cost me $2,000, and I still had a lot of learning left to do by the time I was done with it. So it's not something you can just pick up and learn over the weekend. Okay, let's talk about cover design. Now, of course, I always say that the cover is one of the most important things in your book design and just for your book in general. It's one of the first things someone's going to see when they're making the decision if they want to even pick up your book and decide if they want to buy it. If your cover design is not good, you might not sell many books at all. So there's a few things you need to think about and know before you even have your cover designed or design it yourself. These things are going to be needed before you can move forward with your cover design. Who's going to be the book's printer? Different printers have different requirements for how the cover is set up. So if you don't know who your printer is, you might not set up your book cover correctly to meet their requirements. You'll have to backtrack and do some things over again. What type of binding is going to be used? Are you doing a paperback or a hardcover? The settings that you do and the sizes you set up your cover for are going to be different depending on your binding. What's the size of the book? You need to make a firm decision on what the size of your book is going to be. 5 by 8, 6 by 9, what is it going to be? If you set the cover to the wrong size and then you decide you're going to do a different trim size, you're going to have to go back and redo your cover. You need to know what the final page count is of your final formatted, laid out book. That is for the spine. So while you might be able to have that front cover designed for marketing purposes before you know that final page count, you can't do the spine and probably not the back cover either until you get that final page count. The spine width is determined by the page count of your book, and so until you know that, you don't know what width to put that spine. And you can't just estimate or get somewhat close. It has to be exact or the printer will reject it. Another thing that determines the spine width is the paper stock that your book will be printed on. Both Ingram Spark and CreateSpace let you choose between white or cream paper stock, and the cream paper stock is typically thicker than the white, and it will mean that your spine will be thicker. So you need to know that before you do that spine. And if you're hiring a professional cover designer, you just need to make sure that they know what the printer's cover requirements are. They might be a great designer, but not familiar with how these book printers work. So they may have different requirements that they don't know about, and they may design your cover incorrectly. So you just ask them and make sure they're familiar with the requirements of the printer you are using. And if they're not, just give them the information for your printer so they can give them a call or send them an email and get their requirements from them so that they can set it up correctly. So now talked a little bit about things you need to do before you even think about getting your cover designed. Let's talk a little bit about good versus bad cover design. So some things you want to think about when you're doing your cover design. Is it looking good at a small size? Now, it may look good when it's printed on the book and sitting on a shelf. What about that smaller size when it shows up on the listings on Amazon? Can you still make out what the book cover is? Is the title standing out? Can you make out the title of the book by looking at the cover at the small size? Something to think about. Does it represent your subject matter and genre? If you go look at all the other books in your genre on Amazon, is it completely off? Sometimes that could be a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but if your audience is looking for something specific and then your cover just doesn't even hit the mark, you're going to need to rethink that. Does it look good in black and white? Now, some ebook readers are not color. They only show in black and white and grayscale. If your cover just does not look good in black and white, they're not going to be able to really see your cover very well when they're browsing books to buy on their ebook reader. Also, does the image you have that you want to use for your cover, do you own all the rights that you need in order to use that image on the cover? You can't just go up on the internet and grab images left and right. They are copyright protected. There are certain rights and license issues you need to think about. So you're going to want to look at different stock photography sources or hire an illustrator. Make sure you have the rights. And also, does the cover look professional? Of course, if it looks like a third grader put the cover together and the book is not targeted at third graders, there might be a problem. So if it looks amateurish, people are going to assume that the rest of the book is very amateur as well. And of course, how does it compare to your competition? If you take your cover and you hold it up and look at all the other books showing up on Amazon that are in the same genre, do you think it's going to catch people's eye, or are there other covers up there that are going to they're just going to see that those covers are not yours? So do some comparison, look at your competition, see what their covers look like, make sure the cover you got can compete. I'm going to show you some examples now. The first ones are just about 3 covers that I consider to be good design. And there's a few reasons for that. Mainly, you can tell what genre the book is by looking at it. You don't have to look at the back cover description to kind of get a feel for what these books are about. I have not read these books. These are not books that we have done. I just found them on Amazon. They kind of get an idea that the first one is kind of a little gothic, you know, a little dark, but maybe a little romantic. Kind of get a feel for that one. The second one looks like a romantic comedy to me. Kind of get the feel what I would expect from a book like that. And the third one, of course, is a children's book. You can kind of get the feel for the age on that. You get a sense for it. You don't have to even really read the titles on these or look at the description or know anything other than seeing the cover. You get the book just by looking at the cover. They also look good at smaller sizes. They're nice and sharp, easy to read. You can see the titles on these very clearly, and the authors' names are clear as well. So in my opinion, these are good book cover designs. Now I'm going to show you some examples of bad cover design, and I hope you're not the author. So here's a few other ones I found on Amazon, completely different. You can tell just by looking at these books that yes, these are self-published. First one is just very boring. The typography is bad. It is using what looks to me like just some default word fonts thrown together. The spacing is horrible. It tells you nothing about the book. You would have to read every single line in this to maybe get a sense of what it's about, and then you're still not sure. The second one, while the image of the tree in the background is not bad, but they gave no thought. They just threw the title on there, and it's hard on the eyes, not easy to see. And if you think about it, that cover probably, when it's converted to black and white grayscale, you might not be able to read anything on it. The third one, again, the images aren't too bad. The train image in the background is interesting, but I can't make out that title. I don't know what that says. Maybe when it's printed, you can kind of make it out, but in a small thumbnail size on Amazon, you're not going to be able to read the title. So they went a little too ornate on that, or a lot ornate on that chapter title. It's not clear. You can't make it out. So you might not understand what the title of the book is when you're browsing books or seeing the cover. So those are just some examples. So give your book a critical look. Make sure it doesn't look like any of these 3 covers. There's also some websites out there. I think lousybookcovers.com is one that showcase a lot of bad cover designs. Take a look through them and then take a look at your book cover and just give yourself an honest critique to think of where it falls in that. Another thing when you're working with covers is images. Again, I mentioned you have to have the right to use them. They need to be high resolution. So the images you find, just say on a website, they're low resolution. They need to be at least 300 DPI. The images that you find on the net are usually about 72. They're not going to print very well. CMYK color mode versus RGB. The color mode is important. Printers want it in CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, versus RGB, which is red, green, blue. So you have to make sure your cover is set up to the right color mode. If you're hiring a cover designer, that's one of the things they need to know. They should know these things. Color saturation levels, again, that's tricky. I'm not even really going to get into what that means. It's just the amount, like say you have a certain percentage of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black that you can have to make up a color. But for some printers, they don't want the saturation total to be more than 240. So you can't have 100 cyan, 100 magenta, 100 yellow. You're already over the 240 limit. This is something a cover designer needs to know, and they need to know how to set up the cover correctly for that. The point is, you might think you have a great design for a cover in mind, but you may not have the technical skill or knowledge in order to set it up correctly for the printer. And you need to make sure that if you're hiring a cover designer, that they know these specifications as well, and that they know how to deal with them. Resolution I talked about. This is what I mean by a low resolution and high resolution. This is exaggerated for the screen, but this is how it might look when it's printed. 72 DPI dots per inch, whereas high resolution at 300 dots per inch is going to print really nice and sharp. While a 72 DPI might look good on your screen, it's not going to print like that. It's going to print out like this. So you have to have a high resolution. You can't take a low resolution image and just somehow magically make it high resolution. The original has to be high resolution. So you can't just ask your graphic designer, well, just make it high resolution. Not possible. So you have to start with high resolution. Okay, if you're looking for images to use in your book cover design, there are a lot of stock photography places that you can do so. iStock, Fotolia, Shutterstock, Big Stock, they all sell rights to use images in different types of website design, cover design, etc. You can either buy some credits to purchase one image, or you can get a subscription. Most designers are going to have a subscription to at least one of these services, and they're then able to download and use these covers in design on your behalf. As a customer of them, they can use them in your cover design. We have a subscription to Big Stock, and that's where we pull our images from. But of course, you can always pull images from other places as long as the client really wants a specific image that's available there. We can always go buy credits from another place and just get that one image. Nice thing about these is that, hey, you're going to get the rights to use them. They're going to be high resolution. You have lots of different images to choose from. The downside is they're not exclusive rights to that image. You may choose an image and use them in your cover design, and somebody else chooses the same image and uses it in their cover design. So lots of times we'll manipulate the image or take various images and merge them together to make it more unique, so you're not going to see the same cover design out there. And there's millions of images available, so the chances of that happening are very rare, but it does happen. I have seen covers that have used the same image before on Amazon. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the technical side of covers, bleeds and trim. If you don't know this, again, this is something your cover designer needs to know. So this is a mistake we've seen a lot of times when someone hires a cover designer that doesn't quite know how to do book covers. Might do great design, but they don't know how to set it up correctly for a book cover. One of the biggest issues we see is that designer does not allow for the bleed, which would be the purple area here. So if someone is doing a 6x9 book, they may set the cover up to exactly 6x9. That's not how you do it. You need to have the cover a little bit larger than 6x9. So when it goes to the printer, they're going to trim that edge off on the trim area, and it'll leave a 6x9 book. But if you don't, then sometimes you will get a little bit of white space where that trim is, because you got to have it run off the edge of the paper, then trim down to the sides. So you need to include a bleed, not just to the exact dimensions of your cover. So you got the fold area with the spine, the back cover, and unsafe area means you don't want to put anything important right up on the edge of the cover. So if you got text or important elements of a photo, they shouldn't be on that edge. When they're trimming it, it doesn't always get it 100% perfect, and it may shift a little bit, and you may lose a little bit of what's important in the trim. So bring it in a little bit. And of course, you need to leave room for the barcode. It can either be there on the corner or in the center. That is up to you. Okay, and that's for a paperback. If you're doing a hardcover, you can see that's a lot different. You got to have the flaps in there, and the folds. It gets a lot more complicated. Just wanted to show you that quickly so you know if you're doing both a paperback and a hardcover, your cover designer is going to have to set up 2 different covers to meet the specifications. So this is how the templates look that the printer should be able to give you. And this is an example of how a book cover would look set up to one of the templates. It's going to be a full spread. It's going to include those crop marks and the information that the printer would give to you on their templates. And this should be done as a print-ready PDF and then sent to the printer. So printer requirements really quick, 300 ppi resolution, CMYK color mode, full spread with proper bleeds, the spine width calculated using the final page count and paper type, the print-ready PDF using a specific standard, fonts need to be embedded, which is part of that PDF creation, no more than 240% color saturation, and no important elements in safe area. Those are the default type of things that you have when you're doing a printer requirements. So make sure you're familiar with these and know how to do these, or that your cover designer that you're hiring knows how to set a book up properly for that. I know a lot of technical stuff, but it is needed to know in order to properly build out your book. Making a print-ready PDF, Adobe Acrobat is a PDF creator, and it is the one that is recommended by most printers. Some of them require it. There is a PDF export in both InDesign and Photoshop that uses Adobe Acrobat in the background. That is also perfectly acceptable. There is other PDF creation software out there. Microsoft Word has a Save as PDF option, which you might be able to use for places such as CreateSpace, but it's not recommended by the printer and does sometimes have issues. And you can again find PDF creation software other than Adobe Acrobat, but they're not all created equal, and some printers will only accept the Adobe Acrobat type of PDF. Okay, let's talk about ebooks next. That's pretty much wraps up the cover and interior. We're going to dive into the last segment on this and talk about ebooks. So for ebook creation, is what we're going to refer to here. So there are a lot of different types of ebook devices out there. That's one thing to keep in mind when you're designing your ebook. You got the Kindle, the iPad, the Nook, Sony e-reader, Kobo, ebook reading apps for smartphones and tablets, PC apps, and there's lots of different ways people read ebooks. But something you need to keep in mind is ebooks do not look exactly the same on these various ebook reader devices. The ebook is going to be displayed differently across all of them. So and it's also going to look very different than your print book, which we're going to talk about. So there's lots of different ebook devices. The Kindle is the biggest one out there. You got all the various different types of Kindle devices, plus you have all the Kindle apps. Many people that have an iPad are using the Kindle app on their iPad. I even know somebody that uses the Nook tablet, and they don't use Nook. They have the Kindle app on their Nook tablet. It is the most popular place to buy and to get your ebooks. So when you're having your ebook converted, you should be thinking Kindle as the most important file that you're going to need. Different ebook file types. There is EPUB and there is MOBI. There used to be a lot more different types of ebook creation file types. Not so much anymore. It's down to either EPUB or the MOBI file format. A long time ago, Amazon bought a type of ebook file type creation that was called MobiPocket. So they owned all rights to that, whereas EPUB has kind of developed on its own. There isn't one person that owns EPUB rights, and so a lot of different places accept ebooks in the EPUB file format. Smashwords, iBooks, Nook, pretty much any place other than Kindle will accept an EPUB. Kindle will allow you to upload an EPUB, but then it does an automatic conversion on it and converts it into a Mobi type of format before it then converts it to the final format that is displayed on your Kindle. So Kindle, Mobi format, that is going to be your main priority to how you're designing your book, but you also kind of want to get an EPUB if you want to submit it to other platforms. So a Word document is not an ebook, but you can convert a Word document to an ebook. Just doesn't have the best results. So what's an ebook look like if you crack it open and look at it on the inside? It's not like a Microsoft Word document. It's code. It looks like, if anyone's familiar with website design or XML, it's a variation of that. So if you look at it, this is what if an ebook contents might look like. This is how like the start of one of your chapters may look if you open up that chapter file in the ebook behind the scenes, not how it's displayed on your Kindle, of course. So when you're hiring an ebook designer, this is what they need to be familiar with. They're going to have conversion tools and resources that they can use to do the bulk of the work with them, but they're going to need to know how to break into this code and make the tweaks and everything needed to make the ebook work and look correctly across all different types of devices. So if you don't know this, there are ways you can do an ebook, just not as good. So let's take a look at some various limitations on ebooks versus the print. With the print book, you have full control over how it's displayed to the reader. It's static. How it looks is how it looks. Nothing can be changed. But in an ebook, some things are going to change. The fancy fonts that you have chosen for your print book are not going to be available on the ebook. Each ebook device is going to have a set of fonts that are preloaded onto the device, and that ebook can be displayed to the reader in their choice of one of those fonts. So the font you select is not going to be the font that someone reads it on an ebook device. They choose. So you can see where the chapter title and this is in different fonts. You're still able to get the image over there and even do a drop cap, but the fonts are different. It looks a bit different. There is some ways you can embed a font into an ebook. It's technically possible. However, many of the ebook readers out there don't support it. So while it's technically possible, it doesn't really work in the real world. Not yet, at least. Things are changing. Hopefully one day you'll be able to do that. But one of the things readers like about ebooks is they can choose their font. They can also change their font size. They can make it smaller or they can make it larger. So you can't control that either. But readers like that. Somebody may have trouble with their vision, and reading it in a specific font at a specific size makes it easier for them to read. If you force them to use a certain font size or force them to use a certain font, they might not like you very much. That's why they chose, maybe one of the reasons they chose an ebook versus a print book. And again, here's some limitations. With the book on the left there on the print version, you can see they had some sidebars with the text wrapped around it. In an ebook, you can't do that text wrap with the sidebars. So in this version, this is one that we did as well as the previous one, we redid the ebook so that was handled a little differently. Instead of a sidebar, we put it as just a divider and text box in the middle. So you may have to redesign a more complex book to get a good ebook version out of it. So it's something to think about when you're looking at your book. How complex is it? A simple novel without any of these strange elements is going to convert very cleanly into an ebook. Something more complex is going to get a lot more complicated to make an ebook look good. So let's look at some conversion options you're going to have. There is the easiest and cheapest method, which is just a free automatic conversion. You can find some ebook creating software online, upload, say, a PDF or a Word document, and it will shoot you back an ebook format of your book. But they're free for a reason. You get what you pay for. The results on that are not always good, and you might be frustrated. It's going to kick something back. You look at it, it looks horrible, and their solution is to tweak your Word document and try again. And you keep doing that, and the results are still not looking very good. You can get a little frustrating. If you have a complex book, tables, graphs, lots of images, or anything to that effect, lists, it's not going to do a very good job. And you have to do the testing yourself. You didn't hire someone to do the design or the conversion, so you're going to have to test everything yourself. Now, this is the expert from InDesign, is what most professionals are going to do if they've also done your interior design. Because once you have the book in InDesign, InDesign has some export options to go to an ebook conversion. It does some pretty good results. We still open them up and tweak them a little bit to get the best results, but they're getting better and better at doing a really good job just right out of the box. But you still need to test them. So once you convert from InDesign, you still want to test them. And if you hire a professional, of course, it costs money. It might take some time, but the results are going to be good. They're going to know how to do an ebook properly for you, and they're going to test it for you. Now, you may have heard recently, it's been popping up in social media and the news, that Amazon is cracking down on poorly formatted ebooks. If they get an ebook that has some formatting issues or some conversion issues, and people may have made some complaints about it, they will pull your Kindle file and not have it for sale until you fix those problems. We're not talking about a typo here and there, but unless it has a lot of typos, they can pull it for that as well. So they're cracking down on poorly converted ebooks because they're getting complaints from people about them, and they need to crack down on that. So you do want to make sure that your ebook conversion works across multiple devices. So you need to test it. You either hire someone to do this and they do all the testing for you, and you should make sure who you hire is testing it. There is, like I said, many various ebook readers out there, and they are going to display your ebook differently on each one. So when you're testing your ebook, you need to have access to those different ebook readers to load your ebook in it to make sure your ebook is looking and working properly in that type of ebook reader. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to have every single ebook reader out there, but you need to get some of the main ones. The Kindle Fire or the Kindle Paperwhite are really popular. If you're going to do somewhere outside of Kindle, you're going to want to be able to test the EPUB files, maybe a Nook or an iPad or a Kobo. You also want to test them on some of the phone apps or the tablet apps, and also on the PC apps that people use to read ebooks. So you have to do your testing. So make sure you're doing that, or the person you're hiring is doing that. Kindle does have a free Kindle Previewer that you can download from their website, and it emulates some of their ebook devices that you can test your ebook on. It does a pretty good job, and if you're testing your ebook yourself, that should be perfectly fine. But for more complex books, we have found it doesn't always get it right. The way it's telling you and showing you it's displaying in an ebook device, when it's actually loaded into that ebook device, it's not quite right. So it's not perfect emulation, but it does a pretty good job. And as I mentioned, if you have just a simple novel, converting your ebook files should be a pretty simple process for you. But anything more complex, you need to take some time to get it done correctly. Okay, so some ebook apps that you can look on, the Kindle Previewer I just mentioned. There's a link for you, which will be in the slides, that you can just click on. So that's the Previewer, and then there's just the basic Kindle for PC that people can download to read their Kindle books from, and there's also a Nook for PC. So actually that Nook for PC, I take that back. I believe that is now not correct. I'll correct it before I send the slides out. Nook is going out of business, so they may not have that anymore, but we have Adobe Digital Editions is another one, and I'll make sure I put the link in that for the slides when I send it to you. So, okay, that wraps up the Building Your Book session. And the next step is going to be, of course, marketing the book. And that we have the session on Monday, same time. I hope to see you then. And again, you can sign up on the website. If you have any questions, now's the time to type them into that question box. And I'm just going to kick back and relax and chill for a bit and see if I have any of those questions come in. Otherwise, have a great weekend. I'll be getting this together for you and sending it out over the weekend so you have it before the next class. Have a great one, and just let me know if you have any questions.